Okay, putting your gas mask on first, essential leadership self-care. So I have figured out from doing it last time, and even more so this week, that I think I wrote this one for myself. Taking care of me as a parent and as a coach working with clients. But putting your gas mask on first, this was one of the first pieces of advice my mum gave to me when I became a mum. And she was very clear with me that I couldn't mother well if I didn't look after myself first. And it's something she continues to remind me about, and that was 12 years ago, so it's a consistent message, and quite an important one to me. And I think it is something that, like all the work we do, that is something that is work in progress. Sometimes we're better at it than others, sometimes it means something different. So as I put in the blurb for this webinar, this is about us, because if we're holding teams, families, different communities in our lives, and finding our way through these unprecedented and challenging and uncertain times, and finding a way to manage a different workload, that we need to sustain ourselves. So we're going to go through a couple of tools that I use for myself and use quite a lot of my work. So looking at doing our own temperature check, seeing how we're doing, looking a bit at where we're focusing time and energy and how useful that is, what the impact of that is, and bringing ourselves back to anchor so that we can leave from a more grounded place. And this is all about improving your impact and allowing you to live and work with more ease and space to breathe. And whether people name it or not, a lot of people that come to work with me are literally looking for space to breathe. That comes down to the bottom line of it a lot. And it's so important. It's important for us to model to the people that we work with, colleagues, employees, if we have them, and our clients, and our families. And it gives them permission to look after themselves too. But our well-being also impacts the well-being of the others around us and our organisation, our business, our work, and fulfilment. So, I'm guessing that we've all got commonality here. We've chosen to do the work we do because it matters to us, because it fulfills us, it enriches us, and we get to give service through it. But if we're not looking after ourselves, then we don't actually get to experience that fulfilment from it, because we're fighting fires and just surviving. So it's important for that too. And this is about creating awareness for ourselves, and by creating awareness, we create space where we have choice, and then from that we're more empowered and more resilient to move forward. So how hot is your water? You may well know the analogy of frogs and boiling water. If you put a frog in boiling water, it will jump out. But if you put a frog in cold water and turn up the heat to boiling, the frog will stay there, it will not jump out. And that is similar to us with stress. As things become more stressful, often we don't necessarily notice straight away until it's actually having quite an unhealthy impact on us. And then hopefully we start doing something about it. But if we can check in on ourselves and just see how we're doing as we go on through life as a consistent practice, we get to gauge how hot that water is and how we're doing. So, oh, jumped ahead. So I'm going to ask you to find a neutral way to sit, or stand if you prefer to do that. If you're comfortable to, and it helps, close your eyes. I've got my feet on the floor, I'm sitting on a stool. And just take a moment to come into your body. Use your in-breath to just stretch your lungs a bit, and as you breathe out, come into you and drop down out of your thinking head into your body. Being aware of my voice, any other sounds and temperatures around you. And then I'm going to invite you to imagine all the things you are holding and leading in your life. All those things around you. Now for me, they sort of hang in bubbles around me, all the different things. It might be that they're on post-its for you, or written on a whiteboard, or they might be sort of very real around you. But however that you imagine them, notice how close they are. Anything like weight or size or anything like that around you. So just consider what's the impact at the moment on these things on you. What's the temperature of the water that you're in right now? And someone beautifully extended this metaphor last week to the fact that the water may be a general temperature, but there might be other spots that are cooler or hotter, bubbling around. And while you allow yourself to be with this, what is it you may need to consider at the moment for yourself? So I'm going to invite you to just, again, use your breath. Breathe in. Help lift yourself out of this imagining, this vision. And come back to here now in the group. Wiggle your toes or whatever you need to do. And open your eyes when you're ready. So how was that for you? What did you notice?
I certainly like the metaphor and found that a useful one. The idea that, of course, as you suggested from last week, people well have suggested it's not a constant temperature. There'll be, for want of a better word, eddies and flows of temperature if we can do that. I think that was certainly something I noticed, that generally there, but there are specific temperature gradient, shall we say, though nothing shooting up to 90 odd Celsius, fortunately.
Yes.
Talking about holding the various different things that you're kind of carrying or responsible for. I had kind of this image of little bubbles floating around my head, because, as you can imagine, after at the end 2 weeks International Coaching Week, I've done quite a bit of this. They're in a reasonable state of distance from each other and reasonably balanced. But I was thinking in terms of how something new would fit into that, because there are other things I need to bring into that kind of solar system of stuff floating around. So I just drew myself a little picture of bubbles, and I thought, so if I had an extra bubble, what happened to it? And where would it fit? And I'm kind of thinking, well, maybe it needs to fit into one of the existing ones as opposed to be an extra bubble competing for space with the stuff that's there already. So that's been quite a helpful image that's just come emerged from that exercise. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, thank you for bringing that, because you've just made me realise I probably don't consider the things coming in the same way. So thank you for sharing that, Jeff. That's really useful. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of thought, well, there are things where I might be in boiling water in some of the pots, but in quite cool or lukewarm water in the others. So I think I was wondering, how can I jump from one into the other when I feel like it?
And did anything come up from that, Peter?
Well, I think there's a difference between the visualization of it, and of course that's useful. And as an induction, it helped me to get closer to my feelings there. But in the real world, you can't always decide when you can leap or if it's even possible. So yeah, I mean, it gave me a chance to associate with certain things, but then you sometimes need to disassociate from them too, don't you? So that's not always possible in the real world, is it?
Yes, but I think there's a lot of power to naming the impact something's having on us and going, okay, that's how it's feeling. Right now, that's the impact it's having on me. And at the moment, I might need to finish being with this at the moment. Like, I can't step out right now, but knowing that this is how I'm doing at the moment, rather than ignoring it. And actually, I forgot to mention, so I work a lot with the body, and I find that information on our body is really important. So for me, I find that I hold a lot in my jaw, and if it's gone to my shoulders, then the temperature's getting hotter. So things like that are useful to notice, and we're all different. How we find it easier to tap in, to check in, to see what's going on.
Yeah.
So, taking the check-in a bit further, looking at where we put our time and energy and how we use it. And this is all about coming back to actually, what can I do? Where is my control? Where's my responsibility and ownership? And am I putting time and energy into things that I can't actually affect that much? And this work, you know, as I'm sure you do, that I was doing a lot with clients before I came across the Franklin and Covey model for spheres of control and influence. So the inner sphere is where we have control, and then outside that is where we have some influence, and that sort of dissipates as we go further out. And then outside that are things that we don't have any control or influence over. And that outside space is a reactive space. And the more time we spend in that, the more we decrease our space of control and influence. But that's where we end up feeling things like sadness and depression, anger and frustration, because we're spending energy on something that we literally can't do anything about. And it's things like the past, weather, other people. And obviously we can influence other people, the way we greet them, the way we talk to them, the way we treat them. But we can't actually take any responsibility or ownership for how they choose to respond and react in life and what they bring. So the central space is the proactive space. This is where we have complete control in. It's our beliefs, it's our emotions, actions, behaviours. This is ourselves, this is what we can do. This is the place that there's always something we can do. I would be interested you can take a few minutes if you want to just consider coming back to those things around you, or pick one out that came up. And just consider how much time you're spending out in the reactive space around it, and how much time you're staying rooted in the proactive space. And managing to stay centered on what you have control, ownership, and responsibility for and with. So what comes up for you?
I don't mind sharing if you like. So one of the things, it was interesting, I couldn't go with the hot water analogy, so actually mine was about weight, not temperature.
Okay.
So, and it was a very physical body thing, so actually the weight was how heavy it was in my hand, the thing. So one of the things that I'm actually dealing with right now is a medical emergency. So it's very much in the reactive space. It's the heaviest thing because of COVID-19 and trying to get some attention for it for a family member. Is it taking up a lot of time? Yes, but I feel actually, although it's heavy, I feel actually quite calm about it because I know what I can and can't do, and I'm okay with that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
And I love you bringing that paradox of, yes, something can be really heavy and there can be a lot outside our control, but there's yeah.
I think it's just knowing, it's knowing what we can bring to that. It's not entirely in my control, but I know what I can do to help that situation, and I know what I can't, and I just have to kind of go with the flow on it. Yeah.
I love that. And what is it, perhaps that brings us to the next question, is what is it that keeps you anchored and helps, what works for you particularly in staying that safe? And for you, you're just saying about recognizing what you can do. For someone else, it might be doing something physical, going for a jog or something to bring themselves back to this, or singing. So it'd be nice to know what you know works for you in terms of bringing yourself back to this space.
For me, it's mountain biking actually, or doing something physical that's potentially dangerous, like climbing and things like that, because you have to focus on what's right in front of you, and if you don't, the mistake could then have really catastrophic disaster, and that really sort of focuses what you can and can't control very much for me. I can control the bike, I can control my arms, I can control where I put my hands when I'm climbing, but I can't control things like the weather. So just focus on the bit that's right in front of you. Really narrows everything right down, and then actually everything else seems to just disappear in some respects, because if you can't affect it, then actually it can't affect you. So that's how I cope with it.
Oh, I love that. I suddenly, I almost feel like I'm holding the handlebars of a bike now. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Anything else that really works?
I can really understand that, and it makes me think of the equipment that we need to make, like your bike, or I do some windsurfing, so I always need to check my equipment very thoroughly before I step out, because you want it to be absolutely right before you get into the water, as it were. But if I can, the other thing I was just thinking of, I really like the idea that you've brought up of space, the inner space and the outer space. Because in the coaching environment, we often do things very cerebrally. And I like to bring a lot of embodied movement into coaching. And in particular, because I use drama techniques, I find that that allows you to experiment with different kinds of use of space in a safe way, where you can explore some of these problems and get into the feelings and the bodily reactions and how we speak, how we use our language to get through them. But it's always safe, of course.
Yeah. And I love that, because I often do this using a space, and similar to someone had said that they didn't get on with the check-in with imagining, that used a body instead. And for some people, I would literally get them to put the post-its on the floor and stand in the space to see what's going on. And it's all different ways into the same stuff, and I love that different things work for different people. And
I do some writing. So usually, well, whatever it's intended to be, it always comes out as a poem. But there's something about going into a slightly different space and using some words to kind of tease around, how that might make me and probably my clients feel. So I do use poetry quite a lot when I'm coaching with other people. There's often if they can't find the words themselves, then they might be somewhere else, or they could write them down or whatever. So, and is it escapism? Maybe a bit, but it does that kind of works for me. Come back to, I'll write it down.
Yeah. And there's, perhaps all these things are actually expanding out from it, escaping from it, to find a different way to then come back in their own way. So, we use questions in our work a lot, and these are questions that came up for me around this kind of stuff. check in, what do I know about myself when I find myself in hot water? Because, you know, we've all had a bit of life now. We've been in hot water before, and it's good to check in how we've managed to find our way through it, get out of find some way to turn the temperature down, and what we know about ourselves when we haven't managed it so well, when we have left it too long. What resources do I need to pull on right now that would support my well-being? And those inner resources, but also I think one of the most important internal resources is to reach out and ask for support sometimes. What boundaries need revising? I think when our water gets too hot or we're in the reactive space, checking in with what boundaries may have served us in the past but it might not be now, or that might have relaxed on. What's the worst that would happen if I took a break or slowed down or went for a mountain bike ride or whatever it is? And this is something I definitely had to ask myself on Monday. And what would that give me? That balancing up, what do I need? What do I need to give myself permission for? And this question came up on the International Coaching Federation webinar, one of them last week, from Anne Betts. She was bringing the question, what would make me proud? That was in relative to this lockdown time at the moment, thinking about what we spend our time on when we come out of this, what would make me proud, what would be most important to me. And it's a question that just struck me quite nicely at the moment, of looking at that juggling of time and things and what's the most important thing to do today, all those things. So our cups, whether they're half full or half empty, they are refillable. So in fact, I think we may have answered this partly in that conversation, but this is about what replenishes you. For different people, it's different things, and on different day, it's different things. It might be rest, it might be a mountain bike ride. But if there was one thing that you know replenishes you regularly, or that you particularly need at the moment, something you may have forgotten, what might it be?
Mine is a walk,
Yeah.
a country walk. Especially like today, it's a blue sky and actually looking up. So not looking at my feet, not even necessarily looking immediately around, but looking beyond.
Yeah. We've been in isolation for 2 weeks and it finishes tomorrow. I think on Saturday I might just keep going, not stop. What else replenishes?
Finishing things off works for me as well as the mountain biking, because that's the obvious one. But actually finishing a task off that's been there for a little while, getting that out of the way, that makes me feel an awful lot better.
Yeah, okay.
It's the sea for me. Chosen specifically to live by the sea for that reason. Yeah. So a walk with a dog on the beach or on the esplanade, that'll do it every time. It's great.
And interestingly, the word that comes to me around all those things is space. And sea, definitely, going for a walk and looking at the sky, and finishing something off creates space as well. One of those bubbles that we were talking about is make space for something else. I have just noticed that this chat thing, someone's putting in the chat box, and I now have lost it. I can't actually find it, so I shall come back to the chat box in a minute. So this is my bottom line of it all. This is a mantra that a friend of my mum's passed on to me many years ago, and I lost for a while, and then was reminded by another friend who I'd shared it with. But back to me, and I put my hand on my heart every time I say or think this. But if I don't have the capacity or perhaps the time to go through the other things for myself, then this is the thing that helps bring me back with that. Yes, oh, I've got the chat up now. Look after yourself so you can look after others. And yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? It's just putting the gas mask on so we can enable other people to have their gas mask on too. We're thinking about this with another group of coaches who talked about things like short face-to-face conversations. mission to, sorry, my eyes are going funny, to replace work time with re-energizing time. Yes, definitely that balance of things. I love that. For me, it's about having a creative, messy time of designing new work or writing things in balance with the other stuff as well. And recognizing at the moment all this time on Zoom, actually, it's taken me some time to realize that this way of working is actually quite exhausting.
I can't help mentioning this because it's just been brilliant these last couple of weeks with listening to other coaches as well. But on 2 or 3 occasions, there's been a sort of slightly spiritual side to things. I don't know if other people have noticed that, but like there was nature with Julia, and Harriet, I think, brought that up, and Jeremy was talking about Buddhism, I think, at one point. So I just wonder, you know, when you get into that inner space and your belief system, that there is the spiritual side there, but of course it's connected to the outside world. You can't divorce it from the sea and the clouds and anything else, you know. But it's something that we don't often talk about in coaching, maybe. Perhaps I'm wrong.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I was trained in a school of coaching that does mention it and speak to it. But yeah, definitely that connecting it up and acknowledging that.
I think when we come to exploring purpose, why do I do what I do, etc., with ourselves and clients, that does connect us into what I call the greater human consciousness. And there was a nice metaphor when I was trained a couple of decades ago. It was, you know, stick a bamboo pipe up into the ether to sort of collect those conversations. It's spiritual, but keeps clear of religion unless that's important to you, because that tends to bring us back down to earth with all the things politicians and so on do. So taking it back to root cause, regardless of branding, if you will.
Yeah. Yes, I love that. Yeah.
There's a thing in NLP where, you know, you've got the perceptual positions, and you can sort of move to the 3rd position and then the 4th position, and then in some NLP it goes to like the 5th position, and you sort of wonder, well, what is that position? You know, where are you looking at that from, beyond the ecological context for yourself and the world and everybody and everything. No, it's fascinating to get to that place if you can.
Yeah, and I think at this time, you know, we're talking about self-care. What Steve was saying as well. It's that. What's the phrase? Can't think of the phrase. But we need to look after that part of ourselves and give ourselves space to be with it, so that we can look after the rest of us. But also, when we're needing to look after ourselves, sometimes it's harder to allow ourselves that checking with purpose, going to the deeper part of ourselves, connecting it with the wider world. I feel it's a bit like, for me, if I'm running on empty, I really need good nourishing food, but I don't have the energy to cook it. For me, it's a bit like that. So we need to, it's the balance of allowing ourselves a bit of time to start looking after that, because then that nourishes the rest of us and the rest of our work and being. So if you do want to connect with me, which would be lovely, I am on LinkedIn. My email, I'm sure you probably all have from the coaching group. Anyway, I'm going to come out of this so we've got time for conversation. No, there we go. Hello.
Hello.
So yes, if you have any questions or anything you'd like to input to add to this, to challenge, it'd be lovely.
I found it really interesting again. I did one yesterday with Harriet, and there's a bit of a theme coming through there that I need to slow down a little bit. Don't run around like the headless chicken, which it certainly felt like that before the lockdown. So my background is not coaching; I actually run an organisation, and I had to make some very fast decisions. That actually, I think if I'd have slowed down a little bit and just taken that little bit more time to think about them, maybe I wouldn't have had to change it the next day quite so much. So I've really that's a bit of a theme I've taken to the 3 or 4 I've watched, is that just to slow down a little bit and it was agile leadership yesterday, but you're talking about self-care and slowing down. So that's what I've taken from it.
Yeah. And I think we do better thinking when we have space. I think.
Yeah.
I literally keep a book on my shelf that I'm not particularly interested in reading, but it's called Slow at Work. And I keep it there because I can quite clearly from my desk see the title of it. Yeah. Thanks, David.
I was interested in the issues that Peter was raising. Certainly, it's been intriguing talking to other coaches. So we're people who work with people who find themselves in transitions or stress. And we're supposed to have lots and lots of models and approaches which help people work through that. And then I'm finding myself talking to colleagues who are experiencing all the kinds of things that we're supposed to be helping other people with. You think, so why are they hard? And I think one of the things that, reflecting on this myself personally, one of the things I've personally found helpful is having a rhythm of life which is just adapts to different situations. And you kind of learn this after your years on the planet, things you start to discover. So my own rhythm is based on my Christian faith, my daily devotions, which includes meditation and prayer, Bible reading, and also reflection on my experiences of life. And I find that very helpful coming into a situation now which is very stressful for other people, having had some very stressful periods in my own life, some of which I've handled better than others. But I think now I've got a kind of a rhythm of life which just adapts to the change around me. And I think that what I've noticed talking to some other colleagues is that they're still formulating that rhythm. And so in this situation, some of the things that help them with their rhythm, which is understanding how the world worked, it's not there anymore. We're used to having a transition which then takes us into a new place. We're now into a transition, taking us into a transition, taking us into a transition. Yeah. And there's so much uncertainty. And there's these kind of multiple levels of uncertainty, something we're not used to handling.
Yeah.
So I think there are different ways that people are exploring what will they discover as their new life rhythm, which we may need into a world which may be increasingly uncertain in the future. And what will that look like?
I love that. I'm really into rhythm as well. And but yes, it's having that structure, isn't it, that then you can play with. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting because in this country we're fairly used to things being stable, but of course a lot of other cultures there's almost permanent instability or destabilization or a sense of never knowing quite what's around the corner. So we're probably unused to managing that as a culture. So how we learn to be, people have said, it's about agility, or it's about, being able to change your focus quickly and look at other things, and be able to think on your feet. Some cultures, like the Italians, for instance, they've sort of done that quite well. And I wonder if one thing that we're becoming better at is the art of living, if you want to call it that. So that there's cooking and creating something beautiful around you, which some cultures are very skilled at doing. They've had to be. Perhaps that's something that British people are adapting to at the moment.
Yeah.
Just a thought. Yeah.
Yeah. I got delivered a sourdough on my doorstep from a friend. So I've been doing a bit of bread making. That seems to become part of my rhythm. But interesting what you said about Jeff about prayer and the Christian values is that our core values that we work a lot with as coaches is part of our compass that can ground us. And I'm a Quaker and I was brought up with that. So the simplicity, which comes back to what you were saying, Peter, those the cooking, things like that, actually I find very grounding, because it's simple things that are part of the basis of life that keep me grounded. Yeah.
It's interesting because I spent some time talking to someone yesterday, and naturally a busy person, and has become even busier to the point of boiling water, using your analogy from earlier. And there is just no space. And it just makes me wonder, why is she not allowing herself, or what's holding her back from creating some space. And, you know, when I look at business, a lot of people in business, my background's HR in business, before I found my space. And it was always about running around, making quick decisions, a bit what David was saying earlier, you know, then unpicking a decision, then making another decision, and then finding a week later you've got to change it again. And I just wonder, you know, what can we as coaches bring to clients, to the workplace, that could actually just help organisations to see beyond what they think mindfulness is or whatever it is, that's meditation, it's non-value add, it's just fluffy stuff. So yeah, I was on the call with Harriet yesterday, and there was some things that she said that kind of resonated about how you can actually bring it into a business context, that space piece, because I think we have a hard job selling it.
Yeah.
I don't know if others think the same, but that's, yeah.
I've been thinking about this, and I don't know at all if it's anywhere near the answer, but it has occurred to me that people, and I think I am guilty of this too, more in the family space than workspace, but when we're so used to being busy, the thought of stopping, for one, it's that, oh God, but if I do stop, I might just crumble, and I actually need to keep going, so I can't afford to crumble at the moment.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, how comfortable are people at being with themselves? You know, you might stop and realise actually you're not that comfortable in your own skin.
Yeah.
And that's a very scary thought as well for a lot of people, I think. And you know, coming back to what David said about taking space for business decisions, I think it's a very wise person who recognises that and takes space to do that in an organisation of business, and actually allows spaciousness in for better working and better thinking and better communication. But again, it's quite a scary prospect to give permission for that.
Yeah.
I think your point there about stopping and so on, some years ago I was coaching an operational police chief superintendent, and the sort of thing was basically my question, are you a human doing or a human being? That resonated incredibly well with her, and it was because they were busy doing all the time and used to, like you were saying, David, making quick decisions operationally. And it was really, crikey, about the balance piece. You know, there's obviously something that was coming through there, all busy doing that. And, you know, I think children fitted in if lucky. And one can imagine that with the various shift type things. But is that, are you a human being or are you a human doing, can be quite a question that brings people up with a stop.
Yes, I've asked that one before, and it tends to be one of those, yes, yeah.
Certainly, I think as we kind of carry on with, you know, life coping with COVID-19 in the background, that there will be different conversations going on with different kinds of clients. It'll be interesting bringing some of these together. So we have got the people who are still in work, and overwhelmingly, they're not exclusively, overwhelmingly people I've talked to are still in work are feeling more stressed than they've ever felt. Not just because their job is necessarily any more difficult, there's all this background uncertainty that they're living with. Sometimes they're conscious of it, sometimes they're not. And then you've got people who've adapted to being on furlough. So they've had weeks of experiencing life which got beyond the point of being this is a nice long holiday. This is just how life works now. And then what has that taught them about how you could live life differently? And if you didn't have all these pressures you were bringing in, making your water hot, how then could you reconstruct the way you live or the way you work? What if you didn't have to spend so much traveling and all the dead time that creates? Apart from these very practical issues about how you actually configure your work and how you do your job, there's then the underlying emotional and value issues about, so what kind of lifestyle can you actually live and be productive at the same time? And these conversations I'm having quite a lot with different types of people. Lots of nods, I see.
Yeah.
I think, you know, when people are in, and I've obviously felt this in my own life at different times, when you're in a downward spiral, it's very difficult to turn it around and make it into an upward spiral. Well, thinking of it on the coaching side, there's this thing called the 4 Ds, isn't there, where managers are sort of not encouraged by coaches to do this, but they do it anyway. They will either sort of just drop the thing, they delete it, or they will delegate it to somebody else, or they will delay it for as long as they can until it just disappears, or they will eventually just do it because it hasn't been done, you know. And of course, those are all rather negative responses to a problem. They're just fallback situations rather than, like you were saying at the beginning, being more proactive. But when you're in a falling spiral, it's very difficult to do that.
Yeah, but that brings me to, you know, as Jeff's been mentioning, the difficult of being in uncertainty for all of us really, but this time particularly more so of that. If we're in a spiral, actually to take a choice that we wouldn't normally take, to go against our status quo, is a big unknown and a big uncertainty. And we ask questions and start coaching sessions not having a clue where it's going to go. We sort of learn to be with that and be better at being with that. But not, you know, in other contexts of our lives, certainly I then think, oh yes, perhaps I need to bring a bit more of that here and be okay with not knowing what the answer is going to be. But I think people who haven't had a chance to practice that, it's very difficult to break those cycles, isn't it? To go with something we don't quite know how it's going to work out.
Yeah.
Well, it's quarter two practically. Is there anything else anyone would like to put in the space before we finish this?
I think for me, it's quite a nice chilled session, if you will. You know, you know, just that piece, that opportunity to stand back a little bit, with or without a gas mask. I mean, masks being whatever they are these days.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think it is that opportunity to take that temperature check. Yeah, a chill session based on hot water, says Jeff. Mr. Ashton's humour coming through.
Thank you.
Well, thanks everyone for creating the space.
Yes, thank you ever so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Bryony.
Thank you. Lovely to meet those of you I haven't met before. And
Thank you, Bryony. Thank you.
thanks for joining in.
Okay.
Take care.
Take care. Be in touch.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers, Dan. Cheers, Dan.